Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Guitar Hero instead of learning how to play guitar. Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat instead of taking boxing or karate. Hookups instead of dating. Debit cards and credit cards and fiat currency instead of gold, silver, Bitcoin, etc. Lipstick instead of health and arousal. Financialization instead of production. Edutainment propaganda instead of real journalism. GMO crops and multivitamins instead of healthy, tasty food. Seduction instead of courting. Fake public castigation instead of incarceration. Resignation instead of execution for treason. Diet pills instead of exercise and eating less. Ego instead of awareness. Anger instead of shame. Texting instead of talking. High school, university, and facts instead of common sense. Data analysis instead of wisdom. Initiation into a cult instead of mentoring. Excitement instead of happiness. Cheating instead of fair competition. Shortcuts in production instead of innovation. Child abuse instead of chores. Lingerie and degeneracy instead of virtue and love. Sugar instead of fruit. Coffee and Red Bull instead of a good night's sleep. Social justice instead of compassion. Fame instead of a good reputation. Promiscuity instead of self-control. Apathy instead of equanimity. Consumerism instead of character. Pelotons instead of bicycles. Movies instead of history. Marijuana instead of meditation. Depression instead of stoicism. Misery instead of sorrow. Hatred of conservatives instead of hatred of government. Hatred of guns instead of hatred of tyranny. Cosplay instead of entrepreneurialism. Cats instead of kids. Porn instead of sex. Mutual exploitation instead of trust, care, and helping. Nihilism instead of rational responsibleness. Victim points instead of courage. $5,000 purses and $800 shoes instead of poise. Arrogance instead of confidence. Infantilization instead of independence. When looking at modern-day America and seeing how much it has changed for the worse in just the last 25 years, and how much better the 1950s were than even the 1990s, and how much better the 1800s were than the 1950s, except, the fact that we have technology and they didn't, I can't help but think of that line from the David Fincher movie Seven, when Morgan Freeman's character says, "Not knowing that we were not what was intended."